Okay, Peter, so today we're going to talk about a real fight. This is quite exciting. We've had a bit of a silly season in boxing over the summer, I think. A few self-destructive things that we've discussed before. But now we have an absolute corker of a fight coming up this Saturday, the 25th, at the Tottenham Hotspur ground between Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk. Now, this is an absolute corker of a fight, and it's kind of not, I think, grabbed the public imagination. I don't know if people have realised, the magnitude of this fight and how great it is. And I think the reason is there's a popular perception that Usyk is too small, he's a cruiserweight, Joshua's just too big, and Joshua will almost just steamroll over him. And I don't think that's going to be the case at all. Outside of Tyson Fury, I think this is probably the most dangerous opponent that Joshua can have. So, fair play to him for stepping up for this. And I'm going to outline why I think that. In the next few minutes. So basically, to recap briefly on both careers, Anthony Joshua, as we know, won Olympic gold at the 2012, the 2012 London Olympics in the super heavyweight division. Now, he was a late comer to boxing, only started boxing at 18, so he'd only been boxing for 3 years when he won that Olympic gold. So a really stellar rise through the amateur ranks. At that same Olympics was Alexander Usyk. Now, he won gold in the up to 91 kg division, the heavyweight division, the division just below Joshua's super heavyweight division. And he was a very established amateur. He'd been boxing for Ukraine. He'd had over 300 amateur fights. He'd won kind of everything. He was really seen as a prodigy. And he won gold in the heavyweight division. So both 2012 Olympic gold medalists. Now, they both turned over, had their first pro fights in 2013. Joshua kind of had a bit of a sabbatical from boxing after the 2012 games. Took a year to decide exactly where he was going to go professionally. He's eventually signing with Matchroom and then continuing that stellar rise through the pro ranks. Usyk stayed amateur for a little while, and he took part in the WSB series after the Olympic Games in 2013, where he met Joe Joyce. So incidentally, there's no common opponents in their pro records, as you'd expect, because Usyk was a cruiserweight and until his last two fights, with Joshua being a heavyweight. But they both fought Joe Joyce in the amateurs. Now, in that World Series of Boxing in the amateurs was over 5 rounds, and Usyk beat Joyce on points. Now, similarly, in the ABA London divisional finals in 2010, when Joshua first won the ABA finals, he met Joe Joyce in those Northwest divs, and he stopped him in a round. So that's their one common opponent. So they both had those stellar amateur careers, both turned over in 2013, and Joshua having that great run, winning his initial world title, and now sitting where he does. He's had that one upset against Andy Ruiz, which he later avenged. Usyk continued his amazingly stellar run that he has as an amateur, winning everything in the pro ranks, winning his first world title at cruiserweight in only his 10th pro fight, then cleaning up, becoming the first cruiserweight ever to unify the division, not to unify the division, winning all 4 belts in the 4-belt era. It had been unified before by Evander Holyfield, who obviously successfully moved to heavyweight. So, Usyk is almost like the golden child in boxing. He had everything went for him. He won everything as an amateur. Everything went well for him. He won everything as a professional, as a cruiser. And then he moved to heavyweight in 2019. And his career kind of stalled a bit, and he can't be blamed for that because of the pandemic. But he's had 2 fights at heavyweight, first against Chaz Witherspoon, and then secondly against Derek Chisora. And to be honest, he hasn't looked amazing in those fights. He hasn't looked as dominant as he did at cruiserweight. But the skill set is absolutely massive. He's never been troubled as a pro. He's never been over. He's never looked wobbled. He's never really been behind in a fight. So he's really sort of continued this run. And now he comes up against Joshua in this massive fight. He's been the WBO mandatory because he was their heavyweight champion. He went into the WBO #1 mandatory position, and now he finally gets this fight against Joshua because the Fury Joshua fight has fallen out. Incidentally, Peter, as a digression, I think it's interesting that we also have on October the 9th Fury against Wilder coming up. And again, that doesn't seem to be making any noise. It's almost like the deafening noise that we made for the anticipation of Joshua Fury seems to have, the disappointment of that fallout seems to have been that we're not getting excited about these fights. Because, Fury landed in Vegas the other day and you could almost hear a pin drop, in the press. There's nothing going on. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the fight that we've definitely got, Joshua Usyk. So, Joshua is 31 years old. Usyk is 34 years old. Joshua's record is 24-1. Usyk is 18-0. And why do I think this is a real lively fight? Well, I just think Usyk, as I say, has never been troubled as a professional. He's going to be coming to this fight. He's a southpaw counter-puncher. I think his tactics will be, the first problem he's got to get past Joshua's jab. Joshua is a taller fighter. Joshua has a 4-inch reach advantage over him and a 3-inch height advantage over him. But Usyk is 6'3" and 15.5 stone. 15.5 stone heavyweights may be small in today's division. But as David Haye and Mike Tyson have shown in the past, you can use that extra speed and leverage. And the footwork of Usyk is absolutely outstanding. He's trained by Anatoly Lomachenko, the great Ukrainian trainer, who obviously trains his son as well. And they do all these Ukrainian folk dances for footwear. They do all these unorthodox training methods. But it does seem to pay dividends, and his footwork is amazing. I think he needs to get in the ring. I think he'll try and figure Joshua out. He'll move around, make sure he's never pinned against the ropes. And like I say, as a southpaw counterpuncher, he'll want Joshua to throw. He will want him to throw that big right hand. He'll want to sort of evade the jab. And I think Usyk will be looking at this fight and saying, Joshua gasses late in fights. He's powerful very early on. The power is the thing I've got to worry about. I'm going to negate that power with my footwork and my movement. I'm going to make him come after me. And then as the fight progresses, Joshua starts to gas. A little bit of the power goes. That's when I'm going to come on strong. And if I were Usyk, I'd be saying, I'm looking for probably a unanimous points decision or a late stoppage if his team are really ambitious. But I think it's later in the fight that he will really come into his own, because as I say, he has never shown signs of gassing. His stamina seems to be very good. His footwork is incredible. He does throw sort of dangerous combinations early doors, and he's that southpaw counterpuncher. So I think he's got a very lively chance. And the interesting thing is that a lot of trade people are picking Usyk to spring the upset. Timothy Bradley came out yesterday and said he thinks he's going to do it. And interestingly enough, with the Lomachenko fight, it reminds me of the Lomachenko fight when Lomachenko fought Lopez. And we were all thinking, look, Lomachenko, it's just he's untouchable. He's gonna get through this. And a few of the inside trade people, I remember William Monroe Jr., we were talking to on this show, was saying, no, Lopez is on fire in the gym. You've really got to see this guy. And similar stories have been coming out about Usyk. So that's why I think he's lively and he's in with a chance, and it's a good fight. But when we look at Joshua, Joshua again, and obviously the other thing is, there is a blueprint to beat Joshua, because Andy Ruiz did it. Andy Ruiz was a shorter heavyweight, and I mean, Carlos Takam was a shorter heavyweight, and Joshua seems to have a little bit of trouble with them. So again, that's going to play into the favour of Usyk. And having seen what Ruiz did to Joshua, Usyk, who I think is a much better all-round fighter, has got to fancy that job. Coming to Joshua, he has obviously moved on, progressed, and learned since that Ruiz fight. And, he does seem to have developed well. But in the fights we've seen subsequent to that, we saw him dominate Ruiz over 12 rounds, but an out-of-condition Ruiz, by using that jab, the long right hand, maximising his advantages. And his feet were very good in that fight. Lots of lateral movement to stop Ruiz pressing in and, boxing behind the jab with the big right hand and tying him up inside. And initially I was thinking, well, this is going to be very similar tactics he's going to use against Usyk. And then, moving after that, we saw the Pulev fight. Now, the Pulev fight was interesting because, again, every time Pulev got close to him, a shorter heavyweight, Joshua did tie up. And he looked a bit worried when he got close. And I used the phrase at that time, I think the ghosts of Ruiz are still in Joshua's attic. And I think that's probably going to be true coming into this fight. So are we going to see that almost panic when Usyk gets inside, which he will, and throws those shots? So, but I think Joshua will want to keep this long initially to start with. So initially I was thinking he'll try and play it as a rerun of the second Ruiz fight. But, what is Joshua's advantage in this fight? His footwork is good. He's got those, the size and speed and strength. I think his big advantage in this fight is power. That's the one thing we can say that he has over Usyk. So he's got to utilise that power. And I think if he tries to engage in a kind of tit-for-tat jabbing match with Usyk, I think he will lose on points. I think he really needs to utilise this and get this power going and really take Usyk to a place he hasn't been for. Because, like I say, he hasn't been in with someone as powerful as Joshua. And how is he going to react to that? Now, we don't know that. That's why the opening rounds, although I'm predicting slow opening rounds as they both take a look at each other, it's really going to tell us how the fight's going to play out. Is that jab of Joshua's going to bother Usyk? Is Usyk going to be able to get past it? What's he going to do when he first tastes that power? And obviously, Joshua will be looking to let that right hand come over after that jab. That's going to tell us how the fight's going to play out later on. And, in terms of making a prediction for this fight, I actually think it's going to be Joshua unanimous decision. I think that jab will work well. I think, Joshua will almost be able to match him in footwork. And he's got to bring in that right hand. He's got to bring in that power. And if he can make Usyk wary about getting inside, wary about getting past that right hand, then I think that may sort of dull his offensive capabilities. If he does get inside, well, he will get inside. But when he does get inside, if Joshua ties him up, or if he decides to trade with him, that'll be interesting. If Joshua thinks he's got the power to get him out of there and Usyk can't bother him, I don't really see that happening. But it could become a factor as the fight progresses. So, I think really, Usyk holds a lot of advantages in this fight, with his footwork, with his speed, with his hand speed, his southpaw. being a short heavyweight, which Joshua has previously struggled with, his general overall quality. And the thing is, with undefeated fighters like this, who've never really been really tested, we don't know how far he can go. We don't know how much he can take in those terms of those punches, because he's never been wobbled, he's never been over, and we don't know, in terms of that stamina, how hard he can press in the later parts of the fight. A lot of these things we already know with Joshua. So I think it's a real lively fight. It's a wide open fight. I think the bookies have got it wrong. I think Usyk is a very, very lively contender here. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if he came away with a unanimous decision win or even a late stoppage. But I am going to pick Anthony Joshua to win this fight on points. Control it behind his jab, wing the right hand over, utilise his power to kind of make Usyk a little bit wary. So that is my pick, Peter, for what I think is a fantastic heavyweight fight, and it's just great, to see this division lively. And then hopefully this will be a stepping stone to Fury Joshua. Hopefully Fury Wilder happens on October the 9th, and then we're set up early next year for the big unification fight. So that's my pick. Let's see if I'm right.